If you're like me, you either love movies that are claustrophobic or hate them. Uh, Oddly, I love this one, Centigrade. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I am pleased to have on today the filmmaking team behind Centigrade, producer Bradley J. Ross and director Brendan Walsh. It's really a collaborative effort here. I know Bradley also edited the film. This movie, Centigrade, if there's a trailer out there, I recommend that you do not watch the trailer for this film. I recommend that you just trust me, dive right in, and see this film however you can. It's true. I really went in without having seen a trailer and just going in cold to see this film, and it's terrifying. There's a film that came out a few years ago with Ryan Reynolds called Buried, which I thought was incredible. And it's maybe the only thing I could compare this to. What I'm amazed about is Centigrade is also based on a true story. It's a couple gets trapped in the midst of a storm in their car. She's pregnant. He's obviously concerned for his wife. They have almost nothing, and they're trapped. How did you find out about this story? How did the project get developed? And then later on in this discussion, I want to know how you guys made it, because there's certain parts of this film I don't know how they did that.
Well, first, I love the intro about not watching trailers. I'm me personally, I'm a person that, like, if I watch a trailer for like 3 seconds, I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. I don't want to see the rest of it. So how we so the based on the true story is it's actually it's inspired by real events. And we use that term because it's really an amalgamation of many different stories. One was there was a man in Sweden who was stuck in his car for 2 months, and that's where the kind of seed first started with Daly, who was the writer, the original writer, and then I kind of jumped on to co-write as we added more stories to it. So I think there was stories about, there was a famous story in like 1989 about a couple that was caught in a snowstorm with their baby. It actually turned into like a made-for-TV movie in the late 80s with Neil Patrick Harris. There's as we started developing and kind of reading more about these events, we found a woman who did give birth in her car. She didn't wait as long in the car, to be rescued. But there was a woman who gave birth in her car with her husband. There was a grandma who was stuck on the side of the road in California for 5 days and had to eat, cat food in the back of her car. There was a guy who lived off of Taco Bell fire sauce for 7 days. So it was just kind of the mixture of a lot of stories that kind of inspired all of it.
Yeah, and that was kind of the weird thing, because it's, my wife has an expression, conversation circulation theory, which is like, is it that, once you're familiar with something, you just keep seeing it? But for us, it was like, how does someone get stuck in their car? But once that was on the tip of our brains, it just keeps happening. Like, it was like, once you are familiar with these events, the more, Brendan's a researcher, and he also co-wrote it once we got the script. And he just kept finding more and more circumstances. And we felt the fear factor would be, it just raise the tension and the familiarity, and people would see themselves in this car if we incorporated more and more of these actual real world circumstances. Like in the first scene in the movie, there's a survival kit they find in their car. And that's based off of real information that in Canada, when you get a rental car in these mountainous towns, it comes with these candles if you are to get trapped, because it happens all the time. And it's that little amount of heat that is standard that any person from Montreal, let's say, is familiar with when you rent a car. In the States, that might not be normal to you. So through really good research, we uncovered a lot of these details that made it really authentic. And we wanted to include that in the movie.
Well, it's harrowing. it's frightening. And I love movies that are survival stories, because you always think about, well, what would I do in this circumstance? And what you see is the filmmaker, you see the characters kind of trying out all these things, and the kind of the discussion about the best way to approach solving these problems. I'm watching parts of the film going, I don't even know how they did that, is in terms of the way you shot it. I feel like if you're in the middle of this and you haven't seen the film yet, maybe you want to turn off for a sec, but or fast forward. But I'm looking. Can you tell me just how did you build a car? Did you chop a car in half? Like, how did you shoot this stuff? Because I'm looking and I'm going like, I don't know where was, basically I'm thinking, where's the camera, right? So how did you do all that?
Well, we did, we got 2 cars, and, we went to a mechanic shop. We actually, most of the time you go to like a special effects person, you go to a big movie, when you're a big giant movie, like build a whole set around it. And we went to basically some mechanics and say, can you, we want to take these cars, but like, could you cut this so that this can come out? Can you just pull these pins out? And they were like, so you want us to break this car? Yeah. Could you just, I was like, and we want you to take the top off. And they're like, the whole top, like, no, like a tin can, just like the middle. And they're just like, what, why do you, I was like, no, we're going to pay you to do this. And we're going to take all this stuff. So we did, we retrofitted 2 cars, not too much, but we made the windshields come out easy, the doors come off a little easier. We split some of the panels up, and we had one car that was basically like just for kind of above and top things, where we kind of literally took off the the top level of it.
It reminds me of I don't know if you remember this movie, The War of the Worlds, with Tom Cruise, directed by Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
There's this scene where they're driving down the road and the camera kind of spins around a certain way, and like half the car was open when they did that, and then they digitally added the car so that the camera could rove in the way that it did. Which I thought was clever. I'm just knowing that this is an independent film, I'm sure you didn't have those kind of resources, but knowing what Ryan Reynolds did with Buried, I remember looking at the behind the scenes of Buried, and he talked about that he could only shoot for a certain amount of time because he actually felt claustrophobic. This movie has the same effect. I mean, if you are, and I'm someone who's claustrophobic, so I could not watch your movie during the night. It freaked me out too much. I had to turn it off and watch it during the day because I was just a little freaked out. And I knew that if I watch it too close to bedtime, I would have had some sort of nightmarish, there would have been a nightmare in my head or something. But Ryan Reynolds talked about not being able to film for great lengths of time. Did you have those same kind of issues with claustrophobia with your cast?
Well, not with claustrophobia, more with cold. We shot in a freezer. So we put these 2 cars inside of a freezer. And surprisingly enough, when you start shooting, getting a crew back into a freezer when they've been sitting out in the August summer, and they'd be like, okay, put your jackets back on. We have to move all the stuff again. Oh God, we got to go back to this. So there was we didn't have that, the claustrophobia problem. I mean, there were times where they did like kind of go like, there's a moment where I remember, Vincent was like, there's not much space in here. I was like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, sound is always our ongoing challenge because of that reason. Like getting mics in there, is a tiny space, no matter how we carved out these cars. But I would say, what made this movie special to shoot was the fact that it was such a contained environment, kind of a filmmaker's wet dream, if you will, of the challenge. You mentioned like getting a camera in different locations. That was Brendan's like #1 priority. Like, if you watch the movie, you'll notice the camera's rarely in 2 places at the same time. And that was a well-designed, crafted plan that started with one principle, which was, we know we can shoot this movie in order. which you rarely do. And that backed us up from the very beginning when we were picking out these cars and designing them. We knew, which you rarely can do again, that we could break these cars and age these cars as we shot. So these people who looked at Brendan like he had 20 heads, like most people do, crazy idea. The reason he was sounding like such a crazy person was because he knew in his head that, well, you know, on page 40, we can just break the windshield and we never need the windshield again. You know, so he had that plan. And as we put these cars in the freezer, we kind of were able to abide by that plan. And it was fun for everyone because no one really knew what was around the next bend. And so to your point, because we were in this freezer and everything was fragile and so on and so forth, we only shot 4 days a week. For another reason, if you want to get into that, Brendan, about the actors and how they worked.
Yeah, I mean, we shot. I wanted to shoot the whole thing in order, and I also wanted the actors to diet and like lose weight and grow facial hair. And again, we're not a big budget movie, and there's nothing worse than a bad beard. And so it was just like, this is the best way for us to kind of approach this. The actors were really game. You know, I wanted to shoot 3 days a week, schedules permitted. We had to shoot like 3 or 4 certain weeks. But so that by the end, by the last day, they had literally been in the car for 24 days, which is what they were supposed to be.
And they both lost about
15 to 20, I think, pounds.
It definitely adds to the realism of it. I mean, which was, like I said, I had to watch the film during the day. It's not a. I mean, I wouldn't. This is not a horror film by any means, but it's certainly something that's horrific. In doing your research, Brendan, did you discover maybe some facts that you wanted to work in that you weren't able to, or some other things that that Bradley had to cut? Because he edited the film. Are there some other things that you wanted to explore in your research that maybe weren't a part of this particular story that became a part of other stories? I'm just curious. I find it fascinating. You did a whole lot of research to make sure that it was so accurate.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a loaded question. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I would have, kind of kept trying to do. There was always a question about oxygen in the car and like, how do we make sure that people know there's enough oxygen? And we're like, well, the candle makes you know there's oxygen. Like there was a scene, I was like, but wouldn't it be better if like the candle starts to flicker and go out? Like we have to like find a way to get oxygen. And it didn't ever make it to the final script. And it just kind of wasn't really as necessary. But I'm trying to think of those other. I mean, Bradley might remember more.
Yeah.
Other research.
Hold on. Let me look through my. No, I'm just.
That's great.
I think Brendan always fought for like what was always difficult to hear, which was, I want these people to be normal. It's like, well, that's interesting. Let's. But what he meant, which was really insightful, was this story is about normal people without any experience trying to survive. And you said this earlier in your interview, which is like, if I were in this situation, what would I do? And that's kind of the fun and games of this movie. I mean, this movie, I say fun because it's not really fun, but it's about like, where would you go to the bathroom? Would you try to get out of the car? Would you try to stay in the car? And we really made a concerted effort, Brendan made through writing and through direction, to make sure all those questions are answered. And with the pregnancy, what happens with, delivering a baby and all that stuff. And I think, did all of it get in it? No, some stuff had to hit the cutting room floor. But for the most part, I think a lot of those debates are present in the film. And it's been a fun kind of through test screenings and family and friends watching the film. Those debates have taken an interesting course and has aligned to certain personality types, genders, this, that, and it'll be interesting as it hits the worldwide audience, how people align, because it's made some people really angry. They'd be like, I would never do that. And they get like really hostile. Like, I would break out the first day. And it's like, oh, really? You would? I would love to see that. But
yeah, every researcher, that was one of my big research things was like, every survivalist was like, you never get out of the car. Like, you never leave. You always stay dry. The minute you get out, you get wet, you go into the wilderness. Unless you're a survival expert, like, that's when you die, you know? So, I mean, that was something that kind of always kind of tracked through the film, you know, like, do they stay or do they go? And that is the biggest argument that everybody always has.
Well, in a way, your film will save lives, because this is one way to do it, right? One way to potentially survive. But I'm curious how people have reacted to the film. The people the audience has seen it, like, how have they reacted to it?
Well, I've had a couple of people, you know, I had a friend, or we have a mutual friend who, you know, was like, man, your film's really good, but I couldn't get past 20 minutes because I'm really claustrophobic and I can't watch it. But I mean, we've had really great reactions. You know, I think it does what it wants to do. I've always said I want people to kind of watch the movie kind of like this, like just with their shoulders at their ears. You know,
that was
a little
me.
tense.
That was me. Yeah.
But I wasn't setting out to make like a horror movie, and people were always like, so it's a horror. I was like, well, it's really terrible. Like, it's really bad what happens, and it's heartbreaking most of the time. But like, you know, I always call it like an edge of your seat drama, where you're just like, what is happening to these people? So I don't know if I went off track here, but
no, it's good. Off track is good. I feel like, though, I've had some of those arguments in the car with a partner, not being in the same situation, but those same sort of like, you're just disagreeing about minutia, right? And at the beginning, maybe it's not that important, and it becomes critically important later. So, wow, and first of all, I got to thank you, Brendan, because for doing the podcast, because isn't there like tornadoes? Like, you got to show like where you are for everyone watching this on YouTube.
Yeah, well,
like,
now
what tornadoes? This is what Bradley was telling me. Tornadoes were coming. You might not make it.
There was a big hurricane here this morning, and a tornado touched down. But now it's pretty beautiful.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Now it's great. I mean, this is like what it would be after, but you know, it was a big storm. Everything was underwater here for a while, and I kept answering. You know, I've been doing a few press things today, and I had something I had to do this morning, and I had to have somebody video. And I'm nowhere near New York. I'm, you know, at my family's house, and wasn't. You know, so I kind of woke up emailing people like, you know, the power may go out, and the power's out. The rest of the town, I'm just luckily in a hotel that has power right now.
That's awesome. Well, that's commitment. You know, it's an independent film. You know, it's commitment. Any way to get it done, you got to get it done.
That's right.
Brendan, Bradley, thank you so much for doing the Film Tour podcast. Centigrade is incredible, and I highly recommend it. People have to see this film. But if you are claustrophobic, it should come with a warning for sure.
Yeah, well,
water. That's my favorite thing of watching people watch the movie, because the movie starts and everyone's like drinking their water, and then like halfway through, everyone's like holding their water and not drinking it. So have 2 bottles of water, and don't worry, there'll be plenty of water after you're done screening. So
awesome.
And one of the best things that could happen to this movie is it is being pushed out to, you know, drive-in theaters. And if you can get a chance to see this in a drive-in theater, I think it's a great date movie to be with your loved one in a car.
I think it may be. Okay, I'm glad you bring this up, because I'm addicted to going to the drive-in. People who listen to the podcast or watch it, I'm close to 3 drive-ins. I go every week. I am waiting for movie theaters to open. And I saw one of the Fast and Furious movies at a drive-in, which I thought was great. This movie Unhinged with Russell Crowe coming out to the drive-ins. In this movie, because the setting for the movie is in a car, what better place to see it than a drive-in?
Well, it's funny. It was my dream premiere. You know, 2 years ago, I was like, the best place for this premiere would be, we're all in a drive-in, and like 10 minutes in, and it's in the wintertime. And 10 minutes in, we make special effects guys snow start falling and freak everybody out. So we can't do that part, the last part, but we can still go to a drive-in.
Well, the drive-ins are saving my summer, that's for sure, because I've been going every week. And also you're seeing so many great new indie films and some classic films too, like Ghostbusters and Gremlins played.
Yeah.
And but being able to see independent films at the drive-in, I feel like it's going to bring the drive-in back, because I have a strange suspicion that this pandemic's not going away anytime soon. And there are only about less than 400 drive-ins in the United States. I feel like they could double it pretty quickly with all the unused parking lots all over.
Absolutely.
Easy.
So, see Centigrade at the drive-in. Brendan and Bradley, thank you so much for being on the Film Threat podcast. It was a pleasure to talk to you about your movie.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome.
Thanks, Chris.